All right, today's lesson 3.1 is the properties, and we're going to learn to basically identify the properties of addition and multiplication, and then we'll be using them throughout this whole unit. So the first thing I want you to do is you might want to make a table and start labeling it. We'll always have the addition properties on the left and the multiplication properties on the right. For the first property, commutative, one of the things that I kind of want you to look at and we're going to explore to help you derive the meaning and remember the meaning is the root word. So if you look at the word commutative and you think of commute and what it means to commute, basically that means like changing location or going from one place to another. Many of your parents commute to the city to work. Basically they're leaving Highland and driving into St. Louis. So for math, what that means is the numbers or the variables change places, but it doesn't change the sum or the product. So for addition, A plus B is equal to B plus A. Notice how they've moved around or commuted around the addition sign on the left, and they've commuted around the multiplication sign on the right. The next property we're going to look at is associative property. And if you look at the root word of associative, you kind of see the word associate in there. And that's exactly what this property means. On the left is the addition property, and on the right is the multiplication property. So it's who the numbers are grouped with, or the way in which the numbers are grouped does not change either the sum or the product. So think about that. Who you associate yourself with, who you sit with at lunch, things like that. Those will be considered groups, right? So for math, the parentheses indicate the groups. So look on the left-hand side of the equal sign for addition. So find the equal sign and notice that the order A, B, and C, A, B, and C is the same on both sides. So that tells you this is not commutative. The order remained the same. But look at who they're associated with. A is associated with B, then B is associated with C. So the number that they changed their association with indicates this property. The biggest trap that students get into is they see parentheses and they automatically want to say it's associative, okay? But I could give you an example. In this case, I could change this one right here, and I can show you an example of when using parentheses is not associative. Can you identify the change that I made and why they look similar but it's not associative? So if you notice in the one that I wrote down here in blue, the one thing, you see the grouping symbols on both sides, but it is not associative, it is actually commutative. One thing to check, if you look at the order, 5, 3, and 1, and then it changes order right here, 3, 5, and 1, that the order is changed, making it commutative, but it is a very common mistake that students will make in identifying the properties. So I'm going to take this off of here now because it's a commutative property example and it does not belong on the associative property page. Okay, the next property is identity, property of addition and multiplication. Again, addition's on the left, multiplication on the right. For any number A plus 0 is equal to A, which means the sum of an addend and 0 is the addend. So adding 0 does not change the value of the number. For multiplication, the identity property is multiplying by 1. The product of a factor and 1 is still the factor. So this one's a little bit different for each of these. You have to really be aware of it. I know that you know these concepts already, but you have to be able to identify them and name them as the identity property. One more property, and it only pertains to multiplication. It is the multiplicative property of 0, and for any number A times 0, the product is 0. So any number times 0 is 0. And you guys have known about that for a very long time. You know, and here's another example of where you start to think that it might be associative because it might be, you know, oops. You know, and a lot of times kids will see that and instantly think, oh, look, it's got addition, it's got the parentheses, it's probably a, you know, associative. It does not matter. Anything times 0 is 0, whether it's variables, numbers, sums, products, anything. When they take whatever it is and make that times 0, it becomes the multiplicative property of 0. So we're going to try to name the property. So if I look at the first one, 6 plus 2 plus 4, and the parentheses are around the 2 and the 4, and on the right-hand side I have 6 plus 2 plus 4 in the same order. This would then be a perfect example, but I can see that they changed the grouping. Associative, here's the most important part. You have to put whether it's addition or multiplication. And I know that right now it probably seems silly because these are just addition problems, but there are going to come a time when I'm going to ask you to look at a statement and then it'll have both addition and multiplication and you have to name the property and it is only one. So associative, property of addition. For number 2, 76 times 13 is equal to 13 times 76. Looking at the order, 76 and then multiplication, 13, and then 13 multiplication. So they've changed order around, this multiplication sign so that I know that it is going to be commutative of multiplication. Try a couple more. The first one, 0 plus 36 equals 36. I see a 0. It could possibly be the multiplication property of 0, but it has an addition sign. And I notice that when I'm adding 0 to any number, it remains the same, so that this is the identity property of addition. I see another 0. And here, and parentheses. So I'm thinking associative, I know identity addition, and there's also the 0 of multiplication. Because there's a multiplication sign, any quantity times 0 equals 0, I know that this is the multiplicative property of 0. All right, the last two examples of the day. In the first one, and this is where it becomes tricky, I see multiplication and addition on both sides. So remember I told you the most important part of naming the property is telling me what's happening and if it's addition or multiplication. So I also see grouping symbols. So I might be thinking associative property, okay? So let me look at the order. I have 2 times the quantity of x plus 3 on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, I have x plus 3 times 2. Now looking inside the parentheses, x plus 3 is grouped together on both sides, which now that eliminates the associative property because it's still grouped with the same 2 add-ins. It's the same 2 things, and they haven't changed order inside the parentheses. But what has changed order is the factors. One factor is 2, and one factor is the quantity x plus 3. So notice what happens is these two things have commuted around a multiplication sign, therefore it is commutative of multiplication. And this, again, remember you have to name, and it becomes tricky when you're trying to spell multiplication. It becomes tricky when there's both addition and multiplication involved. In the example for 6, a plus b times 7 is equal to b plus a times 7. Notice that the factors have stayed the same. You have a sum times 7 and a sum times 7. So the factors did not change place. I look at the grouping symbols, A plus B, and even though they're in a different order on the right, it's still the same two add-ins, B and A. So it's not associative. It stayed being associated with the same two letters. However, the A and the B switched places on both sides of the equal sign. That's indicating that it commuted around an addition sign. So commutative of addition. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about abbreviations. You can abbreviate on your homework tonight using the following. So, for addition, you can tell me that it is commutative addition, associative addition, or identity addition. Those would be the three properties you can use if it's an addition property. For multiplication, you can tell me that it is commutative multiplication, associative multiplication, identity multiplication, and the multiplication property of 0. So MZ or ZM would work just as well.